everyone, it's Nina. Thanks so much for joining me today. Today I'm here with Simon Says Stamp, and I've got a card to share with you featuring the Mother's Day Zingers and the cute Cuddly Critters. These are all new stamps from the new My Favorite release, and I really love them, so I'm going to show you here. I've got the Mother's Day set on the left here with all the fun sentiments, and here's the Cuddly Critters on the right. We're also going to be pairing these with the Cuddly Critters accessories, and I'll be using those later on in my card, but these are the main elements we're using for today's card. To start off with, I'm going to be stamping my little koala bear onto some white cardstock using Simon Says Stamp Intense Black ink. This koala bear is absolutely adorable. I'm going to be coloring him with Copic markers. Right now I've got some C00 and I'm adding a complete base coat over top of the entire critter. Now I'm going to bring in my C7. I'm using my darkest color right now because I want to add darker shading in the areas that I want them the darkest, but I also want to add more texture. And this is going to help me add the texture by starting with the darkest color because the lighter colors are going to bleach out the darker colors. So here I'm bringing in the C5, and that's just blending in the C7 into the paper and also adding some darker shading in towards the center of the koala bear. I'm also using some C3 here to blend those two colors out. And as you can see, while I'm coloring over top of the darker colors, it kind of gives the darker colors a more mottled look. And that's going to help us achieve some really nice texture on this little koala bear. So I'm going to go ahead and keep adding some more texture, making sure I'm doing some flicking motions to go ahead and give him some more furry look. I'm going to keep adding in some darker color, the C5 and the C7, start blending that out towards the center just a little bit more. And I'm making sure not to blend my flicks of color out too much because I want that to maintain the texture that we're trying to create on this critter. So once I've colored him all in, I'm going to go ahead and start using some light gray colors. These are some C3, C00, and C1. I'm just doing some flicks of color on this as well. And I'm also going to bring in some C5 just along the very edges to add a little bit of shadowing. I also added some shadows underneath his paws. That helps give him a little bit more dimension. And of course, he needed to have some blush, so I'm just adding some blush to his cheeks. I'm also adding some blush onto his paws and ears. I'm using a Sieg marker underneath first, just to darken up that pink a little bit. Alright, now I have to add a little bit of extra detail, so I'm using a white Signo Broad gel pen, and I'm just adding some flicks of white onto his belly, and I also added some little dots to his cheeks. It just adds a little bit of extra interest to the koala bear, and I also darkened up his eyes and nose with a black marker. Now here's my little koala bear. He's all colored in. Isn't he so adorable? I'm going to be die cutting him using the coordinating dies. These are the Cuddly Critter die set. And I'm going to run this through on my Big Shot machine. Once I've run that through, you can see how cute he is and the nice beautiful white outline around him. I'm also going to do some more die cutting using the little hearts from the Cuddly Critters accessory set. I'll run those through my Big Shot machine using some red cardstock from Simon Says Stamp, and I stacked them up together to create a heart that has a hole in it, just something different. I'm also going to add a little pink heart inside that later on. I'll die cut a few extra small red hearts, and then I'll use the pink cardstock from Simon Says Stamp to die cut a small pink heart to go inside that heart on the bear. Now I'm going to create a background, and I'm using some Tim Holtz Distress ink and a flat Tim Holtz water brush. I don't have any water in this water brush because I like to use them without the water in the barrel. Depending on the technique, sometimes I will put the water inside the barrel, but I like having the flexibility of being able to use it with or without the water inside. I'm working on Canson mixed media paper. This is different than watercolor paper. It can handle watercolor to an extent. Not quite as much as regular watercolor paper. It's a little thinner. But I like the bright whiteness of this paper. So here you can see I'm just quickly adding some stripes of color down onto my paper. It's very light, so it is hard to see. I'm using spun sugar, but I'm just using this to give myself some texture and a little pop of color underneath my scene that we're going to be creating on top of this. So I don't want it to be overpowering because I want to make sure that it just fades into the background and is only a supporting element. Now I love adding splatters, and this is a new tool for me. This is the splatter brush, and this is from Tim Holtz. I'm using this to add lots of fine flicks of water onto my paper. You can use this with paints and other wet medias to go ahead and splatter things onto your projects. I'm going to go ahead and flick that onto my paper, and then I'm going to go ahead and blot it dry with a rag, and then I'll also heat set it just to make sure it's nice and dry. And I ended up doing it a total of 2 times just to make sure that I get enough splatters to the liking that I wanted. Now here's my sentiment. I'm using the You're My Favorite Mom. I'm going to go ahead and stamp this with some more Simon Says Stamp Intense Black dye ink. I'll go ahead and ink that up and stamp it on the right hand top corner of this card. My koala bear is going to end up going down there. I'm going to be building a scene for him to sit on. So I'll go ahead and stamp that down, and now I've got some more watercolor paper. This is regular watercolor paper now. And I'm going to be adding some texture and color to this to create some grass. I've got some Twisted Citron and Mowed Lawn Distress Inks, and I'm just going to have apply down a nice wash of the Twisted Citron color. I'm using a light amount of water because I want to make sure I have the texture of the brush showing just a little bit. I want to be able to show some of the strokes because I want this to have the texture of grass, so I want to make sure that I don't blend things out super smooth. I'm going to go ahead and take a Tim Holtz stencil. This is the bubble stencil. It's one of the layering tag stencil. I'm going to go ahead and start painting on some Mowed Lawn Distress Ink on through this stencil. And this is going to create some nice texture to our background and give it a little bit of a pattern. It's going to be a little bit intense at first, and I'm going to show you how we're going to use that to our advantage to go ahead and soften it out and make it appear a little bit more lighter. You could of course use lighter inks, but I liked these colors because they're bright and I wanted to be able to have the bright color, but I don't want to have the distracting patterns. I just want the texture. So I'm going to keep applying ink through the stencil. I'm using Twisted Citron and Mowed Lawn here together. Just going to go ahead and keep smushing ink onto my block and picking it up. And now I'm going to go ahead and put down a wash of the Twisted Citron. And what this does is it mutes the background texture, so that way it's not distracting, but yet it still is there, so that way it gives our grass interest rather than a flat color. I'm going to add splatters to this as well, and you can see here better how this splatter brush really works. I'll add that flicks of water, and then as I dry this, you can see that texture appear of the splatters onto our paper. It is absolutely awesome. I love that brush. It is a really handy tool to have. So now I'm going to go ahead and die cut this using the My Favorite Things Grassy Hills border die. I'm going to go ahead and run that through my Big Shot twice. Here's one of the pieces. I'm going to be running this through my Big Shot machine using the stitched rectangle dies, which is what I die cut our background panel from. Go ahead and run that through my die cutting machine as well. And I popped my background panel up off of my card using some fun foam. And now I'm popping up the grass using some foam tape. I'll go ahead and apply that down onto the bottom portion of the card. So it's nice, has some nice dimension, and then my little koala bear is going to sit right there. He is so, so cute. I just can't get enough of how cute he is. I'll put some tape runner on the bottom part of this little koala bear, and then on the top portion I'm going to add the foam tape. And this is going to let him sit flush to the grass, but still be able to be popped off of the background panel, just like the grass is. Now I'm going to attach his little heart right there in the center. I'm going to use some liquid adhesive. This is PPA matte adhesive. Many people have questions about the glue bottle that I use for the PPA. This is actually a quilling bottle. It's empty, and it was something I grabbed at the local art store, and I filled it up using the large bottle of PPA. Alright, so now my koala bear, he was looking a little lonely. He needed a friend. So I'm going to be coloring one of the little mouse images from the Cuddly Critters accessory set. I'm using some E markers here. I used E50, E30, and E33. I'm going to blend those colors out. This time I worked lightest to darkest, and then from darkest to lightest back to blend everything together. I'm going to add some blush to his cheeks and also to his ears, and just add a little bit of shading there inside his ears to just give him a little bit more dimension. I use very simple coloring for this little guy, and I'll also add some texture using a white gel pen as well. So I'm going to pop him up off of the card panel. So I'm going to take some foam tape here, and I'm going to attach it down onto the back side of him. And then I'll go ahead and lay him down right next to my little koala bear, and now he looks a lot more happy because he's got a friend there with him. I'll go ahead and take that second piece of grass. I'm going to go ahead and attach this down. This time I'm going to attach it down using just some regular adhesive, and I'm going to lay this right over top. And this is going to have a little bit of dimension because the mouse in front is popped up, but it's not going to be too much, so that way it bulks up the card a lot. I'm going to put a little bit of PPA down and add another heart onto this little mouse so he can hold one too. And then I'll add a little pink heart inside of the koala bear's big heart. So here I decided to add some blades of grass using my markers. I'm just flicking color up off of the bottom portion and up towards the top in just some quick flicks. This is really easy to do and adds so much more dimension to your card. I really love adding the look of texture and dimension with my markers to really intensify my scenes. Finally, I'm adding some sequins from Pretty Pink Posh. These are iridescent mini hearts and also some pink blush 4mm sequins. And then finally, I'm going to tie a red twine bow across the top of my card. I wanted to show you this because I want to show you how I hold down my bows to make sure they stay in place and always look perfect. I just tie it up and then I take a little bit of adhesive right along the back side of the twine bow and I lay that down into the glue. And then I take something heavy like a clear block here and I'll just lay that down on top of my bow until it dries, which usually takes somewhere between 10 to 15 minutes. So that's going to do it for me. I hope you've enjoyed and got some inspiration on using some of the new stamps and dies from the My Favorite Simon Says Stamp release. If you have any questions, be sure to leave them in the comment section below. And be sure to give this video a big thumbs up and subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can find us on social media at Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and Pinterest, as well as our blog. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you again soon.